Mr. President, Your Excellencies, my Lords, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you to a very special Lord Speaker's lecture here in the Sovereign's robing room by kind permission of His Majesty the King. On the occasion of the 75th anniversary, it is a great privilege for me as Lord Speaker and for the House of Lords to host this event in honour of the Council of Europe. I am grateful to the Lords members of the UK delegation, to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, for their engagement on how best to mark this milestone. Before we start, I should mention that divisions may be called during the lecture, i.e. votes, and I would ask peers leaving the room to do so quietly. And I remind guests that this lecture has been recorded and will be available later on the internet. The Council of Europe was born from the ashes and the rubble of the Second World War, with a mission to promote democracy, human rights, and the rule of law across the continent and beyond. Leaders from the 10 founding states gathered in this very city on the 5th of May 1949 to sign the Treaty of London. In that document, they declared that they were, and I quote, convinced that the pursuit of peace based upon justice and international cooperation is vital for the preservation of human society and civilization. At a time when Europe is witnessing armed conflict on a scale unparalleled since the Second World War, that declaration resonates now more powerfully than ever. Thanks to the cooperation and the assistance of the National Archives and Parliamentary Archives, you can read these words for yourselves today in the original Treaty of London, which is displayed just outside this room in the Royal Gallery. Leading statesmen of the United Kingdom were among the founding fathers of the Council of Europe. Sir Winston Churchill was one of the first to call for the creation of a pan-European body to foster peace, safety and freedom in the wake of war. Ernest Bevin welcomed fellow foreign ministers to London to sign the historic treaty, which he described as the foundation of something new and hopeful in European life. Later, the Earl of Kilmuir, David Maxwell Fyfe, played a key role as a member of the Parliamentary Assembly in drafting the European Convention on Human Rights, which established the European Court of Human Rights. And since 1949, the Council has grown to a globally influential body of 46 member states united around common values. I welcome the ambassadors and the representatives of many of those states today. And I would like to highlight the contribution of parliamentarians from all the member states who serve in the Parliamentary Assembly. Over the past 75 years, many members of the House of Lords and the House of Commons have worked there with distinction alongside colleagues from across Europe. The leader of the UK delegation, Lord Foulkes, sadly cannot be with us today, and he sends his apologies. And I pay tribute to his hard work, as well as that of current and former Assembly members from both houses of the UK Parliament. I would also like to offer my warmest welcome to Theodoros Rousopoulos, the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Mr. President has graciously agreed to address us this evening on the theme of the Council of Europe, 75 years and beyond. He will then be joined in conversation by Lolrd Foulkes of Cumnock, a long-standing member of the UK PACE delegation, and there will then some time for questions from the floor. Mr. President has a wide and distinguished career. He has served as a minister in the Greek government, and he has been a member of the Greek delegation to PACE since 2019, and he was elected the Assembly's 35th President in 2024. In a message to mark the 75th anniversary, he stressed that this proud milestone should not be a moment of complacency, but an opportunity to revisit and refresh the core principle on which the Council of Europe was founded. The simple consideration that reconciliation always leads to a better future than hatred. I am sure that all of you, like me, are keen to hear from Mr. President how the ideals and values enshrined in the Treaty of London in 1949 can be applied in the much changed world of 2025 and beyond. So it's a privilege for me to ask Mr. President to address us.
Honourable Lord Speaker, Lords and Ladies, Ambassadors, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you my favourite story, which begins in the winter of 1943, February as it is now. Winston Churchill, in one of his hundreds of speeches over BBC Radio, and as bombs rain down over London, announces his dream of creating a United Nations of Europe as soon as the tragedy of the war is over. He proposed the establishment of a Council of Europe to maintain peace on the European continent. And the dream took wings and flew over Europe, and again, here in London, on May the 5th, 1949, 10 states signed the treaty to establish the Council of Europe, which also included the creation of the first ever international parliamentary body, what is now the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And permit me also to mention that a British parliamentarian, Scottish Labour MP Margaret Herbison, known as Peggy, was the only woman representative at the first meeting of this Parliamentary Assembly in August 1949. Today, women from across our 46 member states make up half of our 612 parliamentarians. We have come some way. I'm a historian by training, and these details of history matter. In our assembly, which meets in plenary 4 times a year in Strasbourg, but whose committees meet many more times a year, we do not pass law, as you know, but reports. We do not substitute the autonomy of each of our member states. We call on it to respect the principles that we have all agreed together and which add value to Western civilization. Our members participate in the Council of Europe on a voluntary basis and without any additional remuneration. Indeed, I like to repeat that many, when they serve their role properly, risk not being re-elected, as they are often absent from their constituencies. Among the important responsibilities of the Assembly that I have the honor of chairing are the election of judges to the European Court of Human Rights and the sending of MPs to observe electoral processes in member states under observation. Last year, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of our foundation. This year, we celebrate 75 years since the signing of the European Convention on Human Rights. By strengthening democratic processes and protecting human rights, the Council of Europe has laid the foundations for peace in Europe, as we argue that conflicts can and must be resolved through dialogue, through legal channels, but not through violence, and the law of the strongest. A few weeks ago in Strasbourg, I had the supreme honor of being re-elected President of the Assembly, and unanimously by the 5 political groups representing the 306 full and 306 alternate members of our Parliament. In my speech then, I told a story that I think you will also find interesting. The story is about ancient Athenian democracy, and while we often praise ancient Athens, I decided to reflect on a darker chapter of its history. The dialogue of Athenians and Millions, found in the Thucydides History book number 5. It recounts the debate between Athens and the neutral island city of Milos during the Peloponnesian War, 416 before Christ. The Athenians, portrayed as pragmatic and cynical, argued that power determines law, while the weaker Millions appealed to morality. When negotiations failed, the Athenians besieged Milos, executed the men, and enslaved the women and children, an act of cruelty emblematic of hegemonic arrogance. Did the Athenians pay for this cynicism? Yes, they did. Their action contributed to their downfall, starting with a catastrophic Sicilian campaign a year later, and eventual defeat by Sparta. The collapse of the Athenian hegemony is a stark reminder of how arrogance and oppression can lead to isolation and ruin. The symbolism is timeless. This is what we have to counteract. We must resist cynicism. We must resist everything that undermines democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. This year that, as I said, we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Human Rights Convention, let's give our best to support our principles against cynicism and anti-democratic obsessions. Let me continue for a moment with the modern Greek democracy, when it was lost because of the dictatorship between 1967 and 1974. Then, in 1969 to be precise, my country was the first country to be expelled from the ranks of the Council of Europe. I declare myself proud because this is simply a powerful example that the Council does not turn a blind eye when its principles and values are violated. 3 years ago, we decided to expel Russia from our ranks after its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. It should be noted that we are the only international organization that has made such a move with quick reflexes. The case of Russia allows for a brief historical reflection. I have spoken of 46 states, home to 750 million free European citizens, once divided, but united through the Council of Europe after 1989. Our role in integrating newly free democracies fostered dialogue, ensuring equal footing for all members. This exchange has eased many tensions peacefully. Yet, fundamental values set clear red lines, and Russia's violation of this led to its expulsion. Today, talk of ending this brutal conflict dominates headlines. We all seek an end to suffering, the return of refugees, prisoners of war, and the thousands of children forcibly taken from Ukraine. But any solution for peace must be based on justice and the respect of international law. A different starting point for this process can only fail and can only undermine the very foundation not only of international law, but also of shared values and ultimately our European security. The Russian Federation has not only invaded a neighbor, triggering the largest conflict in Europe since World War II, but has also escalated hybrid warfare, destabilizing democracy beyond its borders. Meanwhile, democratic backsliding and citizen disengagement pose additional threats. Eroding trust in institutions drives people toward divisive, simplistic solutions. Even top leadership now questions democratic principles at a time when unity is essential to tackle global challenges from climate change to AI. The Council of Europe stands as the backbone of our democracies, addressing migration, trafficking, gender equality, hate speech, and technology risks. Bringing together governments, parliamentarians, civil society, and youth, we craft solutions rooted in human rights and the rule of law. Social media and artificial intelligence are increasingly misused to spread hate and misinformation, subtly shifting societies toward autocracy. Politicians need to denounce falsehoods consistently and invest morally, financially, and publicly in democratic institutions across party lines, setting aside personal ambitions for the common good. Your venerable House of Lords has a tradition of playing the role of watchdog and guardian of the basic fundamental rights and values, which first made your country a beacon for democracies everywhere. And you have often been the strongest supporters for the Council of Europe and for the European Convention of Human Rights, which is its centerpiece. I have the greatest admiration and respect for the way in which you have defended international law principles at the national level, even in the most politically charged situations and at times when courage has been needed. And I'm extremely heartened that the UK government today has been so explicit in its support for the Convention on Human Rights. In the current international context, the commitment and leadership of the United Kingdom in upholding and promoting across the world the rule-based order and democratic principles matters more than ever. I look forward to continuing working with your excellent parliamentary delegation, representing you and your country to uphold democracy in the face of the current perfect storm. Ladies and gentlemen, as we march into the middle of the 21st century, we could not have imagined that we would once again be faced with dangers we thought we had left behind. And if it is the duty of historians not to forget what others have ignored, it is our duty not to paralyze in the face of turmoil and to take the initiative to build the new era together with our allies. Our response to the flattering politics of violence, populism, and power is the intangible values we have conquered over the last centuries. We inherited them from ancestors who fought and gave their lives for them, and we have a duty to pass them to the next generation. Thank you very much for your attention and for the immense honor for me to address such a distinguished audience here in the House of Lords.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was wonderful. We will have a Q&A with our long-standing member of PACE, Lolrd Foulkes, and the President, and then we will go to questions. But Mr. President mentioned about history, and coming from Scotland, I was really glad to hear that he was a student of history at Edinburgh University. And he did his PhD on identity. Now, is that not a preparation for today's environment, Mr. President?
Thank you very much, John. I'm allowed to call the Lord Speaker John. I've known him for how many years now, John?
Too many.
Too many. And thank you, Mr. President, for your excellent speech, fully living up to the expectations of those of us who suggested that we should have you to celebrate the 75th anniversary. Very much indeed. And talking about Peggy Herbison, I am probably one of the few here, if not the only one here, who knew her. And she was a wonderful woman who, even when she was Secretary of State in the Cabinet, stayed in the same house in Shotts. A wonderful lady. But you've done a great, that is proud in the description about the work, the excellent work of the Council of Europe and the Parliamentary Assembly. My concern, however, is that everyone here now knows about it. But when I go around the country, very few people know about it, or they get confused about it, mix it up with something else. What can we do in Greece and in the United Kingdom and in the other of the 46 countries to make the Council of Europe better known and make the work, the excellent work that you've described, better understood?
My dear Lord Foulkes, first of all, I would like to thank you and the Lord Speaker for your kind words. Let me start with this. When I was elected last year, I was invited by the Greek Committee of Defense and Foreign Policy. And I was talking to them about the Council of Europe, I mean parliamentarians from my country. And they were all looking at me like they were looking to someone who is an alien coming from another space. I don't say that to, let's say, humiliate them, but it was really interesting that they were eager to know, so they don't know. I like to say stories, not because I'm a historian, so I'm going to repeat the story that I said earlier to his office, to the President, to your Lord. I said that Mrs. Hadjivasiliou, the Secretary General of our Assembly, a woman, by coincidence is a Greek, not all Greeks are being elected in the Council of Europe, was the other day having lunch with the Secretary General of the European Parliament, and he asked her, what is your budget? Ms. Hadjivasiliou said it's like 16, 17 millions per year. And he replied, you know, we use this money to renovate a restaurant in the European Parliament. We have 2 billion per year. So, is there much Europe in our lives? No. In my opinion, there is much of European bureaucracy in our lives. That's why people are aggressive against Europe. So let us not be confused. You know very well what the Council of Europe is. You have founded it. The fathers of this organization are coming from this country. I have tried hard during my first year of my presidency, traveling in many places, 41 cities in less than 10 months, talking not only to parliamentarians, but to universities, to schools, to people around, what the Council of Europe is. And I had the ability, with my colleagues, to raise the visibility of the Council of Europe. How can I measure it? 2023, 2024, let's make the comparison. The international media had increased their publicity for the Council of Europe over 60%. Is everybody now knows what the Council of Europe is? No. My initiative, which is a new one, we decided with Ms. Hadjivasiliou, and we have created a tool, an AI tool, so all those who are interested in what the Council of Europe is doing and the reports can enter this internet address and find out very fast, briefly, and in a wording which everybody can understand, not a legal one.
Brilliant. Now you've got 100 new, I was going to say ambassadors, but in current terminology, influencers, who will go around and spread the word.
So, if I may just want to add a phrase, one more word. I'm going to send the next days a letter to the Ministers of Education. I took this as an example from the Minister of Education of my country. What he did, he has decided to send all the schools to Greece a letter, a direction, asking the schools, to the teachers, to teach what is the Council of Europe. And they are dedicating a whole week in all Greek schools to the Council of Europe. So I'm going to send a letter to the Ministers of Education asking them, tell the children what the Council of Europe is. We don't need to have a whole week, but just a lesson once a year, it is enough for the people, the younger generation, to understand what the Council of Europe is and
brilliant.
Promote it.
Thank you very much. Now, later on we're going to get questions from the floor, but I'm going to anticipate one that might be the difficult one, and I think I should ask you it now.
You can try.
It may not have escaped your notice that there are one or two people in the United Kingdom who suggest that the United Kingdom might withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, which is effectively withdrawing from the Council of Europe. How would you answer them?
My dear Lord George Foulkes, I was wondering if this question would come up, and it came earlier than I was waiting. So, listen, I was trying to say that we need to do things for the next generation, etc., etc. And then I put my mind, and I was concentrated, and I said, listen, you are going to speak to a place where the people have the biggest history in democracy in modern Europe. My favorite lesson when I'm teaching in the university is about the UK, the England, the medieval, and then the 17th century, when you have started building your democracy. And of course, I make connections with the journalists at that time, and how journalism struggled to gain what the rule of law, human rights, and democracy is. First of all, for themselves. Now, I have decided not to refer to the future, but to the past. You owe to the past. You owe to those who have created the Council of Europe. Because what are you going to say to the ghost of history, the ghost of the people who have passed this very room and other places in UK, when they have decided to do it for the good of the European, the people in Europe? So it is your obligation. You have your Magna Carta. It is there for 800 years, and as far as I know, you still use like 3 articles. Am I right? I'm not a lawyer. But you have the obligation to lead us, to lead Europe. You are not in the European Union. It is your decision. I don't comment on this. I don't criticize. But you have the obligation to talk about what those who had struggled in this place in London, the journalists in the 18th century, the mayor of London, the people in the House of Lords, the parliamentarians, the politicians, about democracy, to establish new procedures like those in the old Athenian agora. You know, there is a French philosopher, Montesquieu. He visited once, we all know Montesquieu, of course, he visited once London. And what was so much impressive to him? When he went back, he said, there was a worker, I think that he was cleaning chimneys, and he had a newspaper under his shoulder. A newspaper, 18th century. So it means that this man, who was a worker and every day working very hard to clean the chimneys in London, had the conscience to understand what is the meaning of being informed, well informed. Because if you are well informed, then you can support democracy. Then you can go on with what our predecessors have given to us as a heritage. So, in short, it is the heritage that you, the British, have to create.
Thank you very much. It may come up from the audience, even though you've given a perfect answer. I've just got one more question before I ask the Lord Speaker, pass it back for the Lord Speaker to invite questions from this very distinguished audience. And I want to ask about Ukraine.
Yes.
We had a discussion about it on a question I had today. We discuss it all the time in this chamber and in the House of Commons. And we are united as parties in support of Ukraine because we support democracy and the Ukrainians are fighting for democracy. What has the Council of Europe and the Parliamentary Assembly in particular done to support the people of Ukraine?
Okay. First of all, I had already said that we are the only organization globally that has dispelled the Russians. It was the Assembly that had decided that. I don't want to say anything against everybody else, but the Assembly led it was the leader. At that time, there were a lot of countries who were actually against the assembly. Of course, then, the next day, the Committee of Ministers, I don't have any complaints, they have ratified what we have decided in our assembly. This is the first. The second, we have implemented new ideas. One of the ideas is the court, the tribunal, the International Tribunal. When we first said that, I think that most of the people who have heard laughed at us. Now, it is there, and it is not only being discussed, but it is about to be created. Will it happen? I don't know, but we have tried. And we have tried because those who are asking, why don't you go to The Hague? I'm not, as I said, a lawyer. Lord Keane must know the answer better than me. It is The Hague that has not to do with the war of aggression. I think there is a lack of legalities there. The third, I was talking about the deported children. According to the authorities in Ukraine, we have like 20,000 deported children. We have only managed to take back 200 to 150 children. Going this way, we need 55 years to bring these children back. I traveled to Geneva some months ago. I had meetings with the Red Cross. They have created a mechanism, which is a very important mechanism, to find the children where they are and bring them back home. It is the same with war prisoners. The day before yesterday, we had a ceremony in Strasbourg talking about the 3 years of invasion. We are now entering the 4th year, this war of aggression, and we had 2 women talking of the torturing that many women, rapes, etc., are facing under the Russian occupation. We have created the registry of damage. This is very important.
Yes.
Over 15,000 cases are already registered there.
Which I think Sandy chairs.
Sandy, the ambassador of UK in the Council of Europe, who is very active as of the delegation. I see here Christopher Chop and Kate Osborne, and I want to thank them for being with us. They are really active. Yes, Lord MacArthur is there. Yeah, we have lunch together and we have this and many others. Sorry if I cannot see all of my colleagues, but I really mean, and I said it earlier, that it is not flattering the UK. You have one of the most active delegations, and if not all of them, but most of them. I remember Lord Chop that stayed at the end of our meetings on Friday, because many of the parliamentarians prefer to go back to their homes on Thursday. So you have a very active delegation, and they know
Lord Griffiths as well.
Lord Griffiths, Leslie, my dear Leslie.
He's hiding behind the...
Yeah, okay. He is the wise man in the assembly. You know, in my inaugural speech, I referred to Leslie as the oldest in the assembly, because Lord Foulkes is just 3 weeks younger.
No, I'm 3 weeks older.
Ah, you're 3 weeks older. So he teased me. I thought that Leslie was older.
Well,
so these are some of the mechanisms that we have created.
yes.
To follow solutions. We do not have the arms, we do not have the money, but we have these values, and we believe that by addressing to the people on these issues, on values, we can make them move and decide to support. Who could believe that the countries in Europe should all support immediately Ukraine? Are there any exceptions? Even those who did not vote, who did not participate in the assembly the day that we expelled the Russians, they have made their efforts to help in bridging the two sides. It's too early to bridge them, or if it is not too early, it's not as easy as one can imagine. But I think that we have done what we could do, talking about the Ukrainians.
Thank you very much, I agree. And before I hand it over back to John to open it up to questions, it's been a privilege for me to stand in for Don Tui. But I want to say we should send him our best wishes. He is a wonderful leader of our delegation, really terrific. worked hard morning, noon and night. And I want you just to give a round of applause for that.
It's a delight to have you with us tonight. We have the Justice Minister, Lord Ponsonby, here to give the official vote of thanks. And he did mention to me, this is a bit of history, he was here organising for this 50th anniversary. So, old boy, up you come.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Lord Speaker. I was actually remembering that 25 years ago, when I was on the delegation, was the time of the Kosovo War, and it was an extremely interesting time to be a member of the delegation. I have to say the insights shown in the debates which we had both in the Council of Europe and the Western European Union, which was going at that time, were absolutely of great interest to me and to all the other members of the UK delegation. In fact, at that time I wrote an article for the House magazine explaining what the Council of Europe did and the reasons why it was a good thing. And I opened the article by saying that the Council of Europe was probably Europe's best kept secret. Nobody knew what it was. However, everybody knows what the Council of Europe actually talks about, the actual issues that it deals with every day when it meets. And it was absolutely my experience that the relevance of those issues, as I said, when the Kosovo War was building up and raging. And I think I'd like to agree actually with what the noble and learned Lord Keane said. It's really the moral authority of the Council of Europe that is which is its greatest strength and means that the institution will endure. The Council of Europe has never been needed more than it is today. We have great challenges, which of course we know, whether they're social, ethical, humanitarian. I also served on the Migration Committee, and the debates we had 25 years ago were very relevant and very similar to the debates which we have today. And for the 75 years, the Council of Europe was created 75 years ago, less than a kilometre from here at St James's Palace, and it captured the togetherness of nations. But as we know, nations are more than their governments, and the Council of Europe has, since its start, recognised the importance of bringing together national parliamentarians representing a wide and democratic plurality of opinions. As I said, I remember very fondly my time on the delegation, and I'm very pleased to see a very good turnout here, and I'm glad it's flourishing so well under your leadership, Mr. Rousopoulos. The democratic ideal is that power shall reside in the free expression of the will of the people. Yet at the international level, when nations speak to nations, we need also to hear the voice of the people. And by bringing different people together through their democratic representatives in a spirit of mutual understanding and cooperation. And I hope, to borrow the motto of another different great institution, namely the BBC, we can ensure that nation shall speak peace unto nation, and they can do that through the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Last month, I had the sad duty to speak at the funeral of my good friend Terry Davis, who was not just a former Secretary-General of the Council of Europe, but also a distinguished member of the Parliamentary Assembly and my leader at the time. On that occasion, I took the opportunity to quote from Terry's speech at the Warsaw Summit of the Council of Europe about 20 years ago. And I quote, "The Europe of the future," he said, "is a united Europe, a unity based on the values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law." He added, "It is clear that the tree of democracy has taken solid root on European soil. Our ambition today is to make sure that it grows high. The task of the Council of Europe is to spread the culture of democracy throughout our continent. What Terry understood is that none of the progress we have made is inevitable. We have to keep making the case for international cooperation, for democracy, for human rights, and for the rule of law. We must be proud of what has been achieved, but never take it for granted. It is therefore so valuable that you, sir, have come here today to the Mother of Parliaments to advocate for these important values. They are as relevant today as they were 75 years ago, and I hope and believe they will still be relevant in another 75 years. We must be the custodians of this work and work to strengthen and protect these values for generations to come. Lord Speaker, I'm sure I therefore speak on behalf of the entire audience in offering our heartfelt thanks to Mr. Rousopoulos, not just for his lecture today, but for his work with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. It is vital work which you're undertaking, and I thank you for what you're doing.
It has been a privilege and delight, Mr. President, for you. And for the audience, thank you for coming out in such numbers. And outside, we can have a little refreshment and a view of the Treaty of London itself. So thank you very much, everyone.